Hey there you guys, and welcome back to my channel and my Ask the Pharmacist series. In today's video, I'm going to be answering the question of, can NSAIDs give you stomach ulcers? So this is a really great question, and it's a very common question. The reason for that is because some NSAIDs are available over the counter, which means that you don't need a prescription in order to obtain them, which means they're very easily accessible. And most people in their life have taken an NSAID at least once. So this is a very great question. They're very common drugs, and I'm excited to answer it. If you are new around here, hello and welcome. My name is Marissa. I am a pharmacist and integrative nutrition health coach. And here on my channel, I have started a brand new series called Ask the Pharmacist, where I'm answering questions that I get asked all the time. Plus, I'm also answering your questions as well. So if you have a question that you would like me to answer with a video, then be sure to comment those down below in the comment section. And just a little disclaimer, this video is for informational and educational purposes only. It does not replace your doctor and or your pharmacist. So the short answer to this question is yes. NSAIDs can potentially increase your risk of developing a stomach ulcer. Now, they are not the only reason that a stomach ulcer may occur, but they definitely can increase your risk of developing one. Additionally, just because you take an NSAID doesn't mean that you're automatically going to end up with a stomach ulcer. This does not happen to everybody who takes one, but it can potentially occur, and it's something that you should know about. Now, the way in which an NSAID can increase your chances of developing a stomach ulcer is actually tied back to how the drug works within your body, and I'm going to explain to you how this happens. So let's first start off by talking about what NSAIDs are. NSAIDs itself stands for non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And this is a class of medications, and there are several medications within this class. Some are available over the counter, and some are prescription only. I'm gonna mention a few examples of those in just a second. And they're commonly used for a few different reasons. So they work as anti-inflammatory drugs, so they can help reduce inflammation. They work as analgesics, meaning that they can help reduce pain, and they also work as antipyretics, meaning that they can help reduce a fever. Some common examples of NSAIDs that are available over the counter, meaning that you do not need a prescription written by a practitioner in order to obtain the medication, include ibuprofen, which is the generic name for Advil and Motrin. There is naproxen, which is the generic name for Aleve. There is aspirin. Some common brand drug names of these include Bayer, Bufferin, and Excedrin. And then there's also one called diclofenac. This is available as a gel, and the brand name for this is Voltaren. I have seen a couple other companies starting to come out with this as well. Another one is Motrin arthritis pain, but I'm sure that there are several more. And if there aren't, I'm sure they will be coming. And then some examples of NSAIDs that are prescription only, meaning that you need a prescription written by a practitioner in order to obtain the medication, include certain doses of ibuprofen and naproxen. These are usually going to be higher doses than what you can find over the counter. Then there's also another drug called meloxicam, which is the generic name for Mobic. We have celecoxib, which is the generic name for Celebrex. And then there is diclofenac, which is available as a gel, as well as an oral pill. This is not an all-inclusive list. There are actually quite a few of NSAIDs that are prescription only, but the ones that I have mentioned are some of the most common ones. Okay, so now that we have briefly introduced what NSAIDs are, now we're going to move into talking about how they work within our body or their mechanism of action. And when you understand how they work, then it's going to be a lot easier to understand how they can potentially increase your chances of developing a stomach ulcer. Okay, so I'm about to mention a couple of scientific terms here. Don't let it scare you or overwhelm you. In a moment, you will see the big picture, but I just want to provide you guys with the information in case you go on Google, and this way you've heard it before and all that. Or if you're talking to your doctor and they happen to mention something like this, again, you've heard it before, okay? But don't let it overwhelm you. So essentially what ends up happening in the body is that we have some sort of a stimulus, and this triggers inflammation, okay? And we get a disturbance of our cell membrane. The cell membrane is just the thing that encloses each cell and protects the internal contents of the cell, like our DNA, the nucleus. We have, protein synthesis happening, energy production. There's a lot going on within the cell that we learned about back in biology. we have that disturbance of the cell membrane, okay, and that's, again, the thing that encloses the cell. And what ends up happening is that we are synthesizing a molecule called arachidonic acid, and we synthesize that using an essential fatty acid called alpha-linoleic acid, or ALA, which is actually an omega-3 fatty acid. Now, arachidonic acid is actually used to further synthesize other chemical molecules that are used in the body for various reasons. And there's multiple what we call enzymatic pathways, and we're gonna focus in on one of them. Real quick, what's an enzyme or an enzymatic pathway? An enzyme is essentially a protein that just helps speed along a reaction. Without the enzyme, the reaction would take a long time to occur. Okay, and again, a reaction is just that you have A, and then you get like, B and C, okay? And we have an enzyme just to help speed that along. And the enzymatic pathway that we are going to be focusing in on for today's discussion is called the cyclooxygenase pathway. The enzyme is cyclooxygenase, and it's abbreviated as COX, C-O-X. And there are actually two COX enzymes, COX-1 and COX-2. And ultimately, from the COX enzymes, we are going to be synthesizing more molecules that are going to do more different things within the body. And those are called prostaglandins and thromboxane. For today's discussion, we are going to be focusing in on the prostaglandins. So the main takeaway from that entire explanation there is that we have some sort of a stimulus that triggers inflammation, and then through the cyclooxygenase enzymatic pathway, we develop prostaglandins. So that's what I want you to take away from that explanation. Prostaglandins are a group of fatty acids, and they have strong protective effects on our gastric mucosa. Now, if you have no idea what the gastric mucosa is, then I'm going to have you stop this video, pause it, and go back to the first episode that I created for this series where I talked about the digestive system. I went into detail on each part of it, and in there, I talked about the gastric mucosa quite a bit, and knowing that is going to help you in this video. But I am going to provide you guys with a quick review as well. So our stomach has 5 different layers, and the innermost layer is called the mucosa, or the gastric mucosa. And essentially what we are trying to do is we want to protect that against the harsh environment thanks to the hydrochloric acid and the pepsin. We do that with the mucosal barrier, which is that thick bicarbonate, alkaline rich mucus that just lines the mucosa and protects it against the hydrochloric acid and the pepsin. Without it, those could damage our gastric mucosa, which again is that innermost layer of our stomach. And the prostaglandins that are synthesized through the cyclooxygenase pathway have a very strong and protective effect on our gastric mucosa. Okay, they do this by increasing mucus production as well as bicarbonate secretion. So this is very helpful and supportive to the health of our mucosal barrier, which again is protecting the gastric mucosa, that innermost lining of the stomach, from the very harsh environment that is going on in the stomach right now that is necessary for the proper digestion of our food. Okay, so that's going to be the hydrochloric acid, which is creating a very acidic environment, and we also have the pepsin, which is that protein digesting enzyme. Additionally, the prostaglandins are helping to support better blood flow to the mucosal lining, so delivering oxygen, delivering nutrients to the cell, anything that it really needs to thrive, as well as getting rid of anything that no longer needs to be there. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. NSAIDs work in the body by inhibiting the cyclooxygenase enzyme. Okay, so they are a COX enzyme inhibitor. So what this means is that if we are blocking that enzyme, that means that we're not going to be producing prostaglandins. And when we are not producing prostaglandins, this is going to affect the health of our mucosal barrier, which is going to affect the health of our mucosa, because it's going to leave it more vulnerable to the harsh environment that's created by the hydrochloric acid and the pepsin, which is that protein digesting enzyme. Additionally, the NSAID drug itself, meaning the actual molecule of the drug, is acidic, and that can actually cause some superficial mucosal damage after ingesting the drug, and it can happen fairly quickly after taking it. And that right there is a reason why it's recommended to take an NSAID with some food to help minimize some of that gastric irritation. Okay, so to sum up here, the NSAIDs can damage and interfere with the health of the gastric mucosa through two different mechanisms. The first one is that the NSAID drug itself is acidic, and when you ingest the oral pill, that can cause some superficial mucosal damage. And then the second mechanism is that the NSAID drug works by inhibiting the COX enzyme or the cyclooxygenase enzyme, okay? And when it does that, we're not going to create the prostaglandins, and if we don't have the prostaglandins, then we're not getting that protective effect on our mucosal barrier. And if we don't have a very strong mucosal barrier, then that leaves the mucosa, which is the innermost lining of the stomach, more vulnerable to the harsh environment that is within the stomach, okay, which is the hydrochloric acid and the pepsin protein digesting enzyme. Also, the risk of GI complications occurring does vary to some degree for each NSAID. It depends on which COX enzyme is being inhibited, but that being said, all NSAIDs can potentially cause some degree of GI irritation. Okay, so that is how NSAIDs can potentially increase your chances of developing a stomach ulcer. As I mentioned in the beginning of today's video, not everybody who takes an NSAID is going to develop a stomach ulcer, okay? But it is an adverse effect of, or an adverse event of the drug, and it is something that you need to be aware of, especially if you are somebody who is on long-term NSAID use. Anything over the counter is going to be short-term use unless otherwise directed to by your doctor. Either way, talk to your doctor, talk to your pharmacist about your individual situation. Additionally, I just want to point out that the NSAID-induced stomach ulcers here, they can be dose dependent. What does that mean? It means that your risk or your chances of developing a stomach ulcer from taking these medications does increase when you are taking higher doses, especially for longer periods of time or extended periods of time. However, that being said, these stomach ulcers can still occur at lower doses of NSAID use. So I just wanted to point that out there. And just a quick note on safety here. If you are taking an NSAID and you are experiencing a lot of gastric pain, then you need to talk to your doctor about that. You need to have a conversation with them. And hopefully this does not happen to you, but just in case it does, I want to make sure that I mention it in this video. If you happen to throw up and you see bright red blood in your vomit, or your vomit looks like black coffee grounds, okay, that could be just digested blood from your stomach that you have thrown up. Or on the other side, if you have a bowel movement and you have bright red blood in your stool, or you have like a black tarry sticky stool, that could be digested blood from your stomach as well. And either one of those is considered a medical emergency. You have an active GI bleed and you need to call 911 and get yourself seen at an emergency room. All right, you guys, so that is all I have for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it and learned something from it. If you did, please let me know down below in the comment section, and please give the video a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. My hope with this video is that you feel more informed, you feel better educated about a drug that you either are taking or you're thinking about taking, and you can have a great discussion with your doctor and pharmacist about it. And if you guys have any questions that you would like me to answer for this series, my Ask the Pharmacist series, then please comment those down below as well. And be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I also share a lot of healthy recipes, food inspiration, and meal prep ideas, as well as simple and realistic ways for you to improve your health on a daily basis. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.